Okay, I went and took the test on Friday. This is the second time that I took it. The first time I took it, it was more so to figure out how the technology worked. Just a general, I kind of just wanted to know what was going on with it. I took it in 45 minutes and I was out of there. This last time I took it, I really sat there and tried to remember all the questions. I really took time to figure out what was up with each one of the questions and whatever else. And I went through it like 3 or 4 times, the entire test 3 or 4 times, remembered everything. I wrote everything down on the notes. I said, okay. So I had a visual imprint of it, so when we came back in to talk about it, I would remember it. But most importantly is that when the test ended, I waved to the person to come over. I said, I'm done, and for them to shut off my test. And they're like, you have to take the survey. I said, I want to take the survey. I've done this test 30 times. I've tested in here so many times, you don't need to know my opinion anymore. I'm sure you'll be okay without it. She's like, no, you have to do it to be able to whatever. I'm like, I just go, and I just clicked right through it. There's 12 questions. I'm like,
You didn't answer any of them?
Didn't answer any of them. I just clicked right through it. And a little screen popped up, and it said, test administrator score, ... And it was, this all happened in less than a second. It goes 100%, and then the screen disappeared. So you can see it graded it real quick, and because I'd overloaded the system with all the clicks, it showed it on the screen instead of what probably in other instances would be a blip, and nobody would see it. It popped up there. And I said to her, I go, did you show my score? And she goes, yeah. And she goes, but I didn't see what it was. I go, it said 100%. And she goes, oh, yay, wow. And I'm like, I don't care. That's not what I'm worried about. I just want to make sure that that's what it said, so we know. So on that note, that's obviously of great use to us, because now we're not guessing as to what the right answers were for these tests. We know, because if I would have gotten a 97, we wouldn't know which one it was.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful that it ended up being 100. So that being said, we'll have to work from the assumption that you're going to get the same test that I got. Worst case scenario, you'll probably get it the second time, because I've taken it twice. I got the exact same test twice. Exact. Like, it wasn't... There might have been some variation in the answers that you could choose from. I'm not 100% sure, but every question was... I had seen that question before. So, like I said, what I had chosen to do was to remember the test as much as I could, and come in here and relay that information to you guys the best that I could, and tape it, and so that way you can use this video right before you go take your test, like load up on it an hour beforehand, and if anyone decided not to come today, that I wouldn't have to come and do this again, which is so really just naked self-interest in all of this for me. That being the case, we got here a little early because Barry had to go do something, and so we've gone through all the questions, but we can do it again, and we'll hopefully get a better video of it this time, and catch you up on what's going on. Do you have any questions or concerns or anything about what you have before we get dialed into this?
I don't think so. I felt alright through all the other classes we've gone to, but I don't know. We'll see.
He also hasn't done the technology yet, so that's going to be a little bit of a shock. The second time I took it, I actually liked it. I was like, this is fucking easy.
Dude, I know, yeah.
Because I could pull down. I was like, this is fucking easy.
I know. And there's a couple other things I learned about the technology too this last time. On that note, so just because we're video capturing this too, I'll reiterate it. Remember when you pop up your exhibit screen that you can grab it from the top, move it down, look at your question, put it back, go down, put it back. The one thing I realized in this last test after doing the exhibit tutorial is that once you pop your exhibit up, if you hit enter, it makes the exhibit disappear. Because that was frustrating me too, because you kind of had to move the exhibit out of the way, and you kind of had to click zoom or whatever else. Now you can pop your exhibit up. If you want to see the question, click enter, and the exhibit goes away. So between those two things, I was really able to cut through the technology portion of this very quickly. So that being said, the technology portion of this shouldn't be difficult in any way to you. What I think we discovered this last time was that there are probably 6 or 7 questions that we'll call them booby-trapped, that we now know the right answers to, if we are to get the same test next time. And we can probably focus on those more than anything right now that we do know what the right answer to them is.
Have you guys been taking it at the same place?
I always take mine at SAC. Watt and Manlow, Cal Center Drive.
I did Roseville the first time, and I did,
If you do 8 a.m. at that one and you're there by 7:30, you'll be the first one at the front door, or 7:15, because they don't open the doors till 7:30, so you can make sure you're the first one taking the test that day. Because I hate when you have to go and then there's like a line of 90 people trying to cram in there and study and.
Well, I've been taking mine the same place. Mine's in staff too, but it's off like Gateway or something.
that's the one I did. Gate Oaks, or
Gate
Oak something Parkway or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why does my fucking computer always want to update?
Okay, so this test is 30 questions.
They're in the bottom. Go to over here, other side, bottom right. Surprised why it's not here.
You are?
Well, it is Sunday,
I know. Yeah.
and I don't think Scott can like ever do weekends. So I think he told Chris that he can never work the weekend.
Probably just not willing to. He's got kids.
It seems like all the soils guys they hired all have kids and like families and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he does a lot of church stuff too or something.
Does he?
I think Scott does, yeah. Barry going gold mining today.
I was like, Barry, you working today? He's like, no, I'm going gold mining.
Is
Your
he?
safety vest in your young dog shirt, okay.
Okay, so, excuse me, we'll take it from the top. The general notes questions on this test, the first one asked you what the required PSI of the concrete in foundations was. That was no harder than going to the general notes and seeing that it is 4,500 PSI. Another general notes question was, what is the required grade for ASTM 615 steel? What grade should it be? And if you go to the reinforcing steel section of the general notes, you'll see a note that says all A615 steel shall be grade 60. So that was as simple as that.
It was the grade of steel in the foundation.
It did not ask specifically where the steel was. It just said for A615 steel, what grade should it be? And so you go to the general notes and you see that the A615 steel should be grade 60. The test asked you, placement of concrete shall conform to which of the following standards? ACI 318, ACI 304, CBC 2016, or something else. And it's a little confusing because your first instinct is ACI 318. That was the first section mentioned in the concrete general notes. It says ACI 318 governs all concrete related something or other. So you think, oh, that's got to be the answer. But if you look down like 6 or 7 sections, it says the placement of concrete shall conform to ACI 304, or whatever it was. Yeah. And so the answer for that one was ACI 304. There were you were asked lap splice questions 3 different times, 3 different types of lap splice questions. The first one asks you for number 8 bars in a horizontal, number 8 bars occurring horizontally in a cast in place wall. What is the required lap splice length? And the lap splice schedule requires you to know what PSI the concrete is to get your lap splice length. So in this case, it asked you for a cast in place wall. And we go to our general notes, we see the cast in place wall was 5,000. I forget what it was. The cast in place wall, we'll say it was 5,000. And we know we're dealing with the number 8 bar. And so you go there to there. But there's a couple tricky parts about this that make it a little extra complicated. One of them is they give you a tension development schedule right above it on the same page. So you got to make sure you're dealing with the lap schedule, not the development schedule above. And secondly, it breaks this, it gives you two numbers. It gives you top bar, and I think they call it other. I don't know if they call it bottom bar, they call it other. And then your inclination is to go spend a bunch of time figuring out what the top bar is and what the bottom bar is and whatever. But what you should notice is that of your answers, only this one isn't your answer anyway, so it can't be a top bar. It has to be the other one, which I think was 62 inches. So you don't have to spend a bunch of time figuring out which is the top bar, which is the bottom bar. Just look at the choices that you're given on your answer sheet and what is actually in this section. I think it was 62 inches, and you can answer it that way. Another lap splice question was, what is the required lap splice length in the vertical steel in the column at B11 on the second floor? Something like that. And what we're going to want to do to answer the column lap splice question is get the column schedule open. The column schedule, of course, gives you a number of locations. And it draws pictures of columns right there, how they lap, and what the steel is at each of the different tiers. This is the fourth floor, this is the third floor, this is the second floor, this is whatever. Again, our inclination is to figure out what size the steel is and then go to a lap schedule, but that's not how you answer this one. If you notice the very far right of the page, it says number 9's lap at like 6'2", and number 11's lap at 8'5". You see really quickly that the kind of bars that we're dealing with in our column B4, whatever it was number 11's. You see that number 11's lap at 8'5", and your correct answer then for that lap question is going to be 8'5". But the trick to this is make sure you scroll all the way down to the the bottom right-hand corner on your page to pick up this little lap note. The last lap question was, they give you a foundation plan, and I think there's a shear wall in the middle of the building. This is the footing for it. And it says, what is the required lap in the bottom reinforcing steel and the footing on B line between 8 and 11? Something like that, I forget, or it was like 5 and 8 or something. It said, what is the required lap in the reinforcing steel in this? And again, our inclination is to figure out what the steel is and go back to a schedule. But in this particular instance, there's a little elevation marker right there. And it turns that footing up to where we can see it like this. And it is a stepped footing, and I think it's a shear wall footing, but I don't remember. You see the bottom steel, you see the top steel. I think he maybe show you some transition bars, something like that. But there's a little note right here that says lap 8'5", and that's how you answer that question.
So that thing is a cut right there?
It's a cut. It's an elevation view. It flips the view up this way so you can see a sideways of it. And if you scour all the way around it, down on the bottom left, there's a little lap note. And you pick it up right there. They go back to this same shear wall footing numerous times in the test. And one of the questions asked you, what is the required additional steel at the, I think this is the one that says the length. It says either, it's like what is the size and the length, or what is the size, and I think it is what is the size and the length. Well, that's another one. Okay, good. An additional steel question is, it refers you to this footing again. It says, what is the size of the additional steel at footing B between 8 and 11? And you'll see that this you do the same thing, you pull up the elevation, you look at the side view, and it's going to show you, okay, these are number 5s, these are number, but there's a little note right here that says ADDL, additional, and you see, and it says like 3 number 6s, like that, and your answers are, what is the additional steel? 3 number 6s, 4 number 4s, whatever, 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 and the answer is going to be 3 number 6s. But while on this question, that just made me remember another one. We'll call this question 28. It asks you how long the bottom reinforcement in this footing is. And it asks you between B 8 to 9. So it gives you one section from here to here. It says how long is the bottom reinforcement. And the way that you figure this out is that the steel is identified down here. It's going to say number 5 at 16, number 5 by 14 feet at 16. If you don't realize that this X tells you how long it is by 14 feet, you'll get it wrong. And I think in this instance it was actually like 42, no, it wasn't 42, I forget what it was. But it asks you how long the bottom bars are. You're looking for the X symbol because that tells you how long something is. And that was another question that you're going to get about this particular footing. And we'll call that 28, length of bottom bars. Okay. We've talked about this at length already, but it came up on the test, so we'll do it again. It asks you, it's going to give you a framing plan. It's going to ask you about a beam from here to here. And it's going to say, what is the tie spacing at each end of this beam? And this beam is a PG1, we'll say. Obviously, one of the other pages they're going to give you is your beam schedule. You go to the beam schedule, and you, I think it says it right there, but basically you go to PG1. You go to PG1, and I think it says it right there. It's like 1 at 3 each end, 1 at 3, 4 at 6, blah, blah, blah. And you just correlate that right back to the answers that they give you. It's just that easy. There was nothing difficult about it. The only thing that you need to know is EE means each end. If you're not able to figure that much out, you might get that question wrong. Lateral column ties. What was the lateral column ties about? Okay, that one. All right. So you may remember that we did this question before, where it's going to say the column at B4 between the 8th and the 9th level has how many closed and how many cross ties. And what you have to do is you go to B4 in the column schedule. Column schedule is going to have a column right here, B4. And there's a little note on the side right here that says, for ties, go to 12 on S5.1. Cool, we know the tie spacing for this column is 12 on S5.1. You go to 5.1, and it's got your sheet like this. It has all of these cut views of every different column type. And this one has circular ties. This one has a closed tie and a cross tie. This one has whatever, whatever. Well, we get to our picture, and it's a column, 1, 2, 3, like that, like that. It's got the closed tie. It's got a cross tie, a cross tie, a cross tie. It's got them going the opposite direction like this. And the picture becomes muddled because these are all on top of each other. Your choices are 1 closed, 2 closed, 1 closed, and 3 cross, 1 closed, and 4 cross. I think there might even be another one right there. And what's the answer? And
Close and 4 cross.
that's what I thought the first time, but I took extra time the second time to figure it out. And on my second test, it actually was like this. And that's what made me realize that I got it wrong the first time. It would have been 5, but 5 wasn't an option. 1 closed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cross. And I was sitting there going, it's impossible, you can't. And then I realized it didn't. The right answer isn't here. What is the best answer? What's the only thing we know for sure? Was the 1 closed. Right. Right, it's BS, but that is what it is. So anyways, when you get to this one, you don't have to waste too much time on it. At least in the test that I got, the question I got, it was 1 closed. Okay, on that note, another tricky one about this was it asked you what size ties exist in the column at B2 at level whatever, at level 3 to 4, whatever, I forget what it was. What size ties? And it gives you 2 sheets that have nothing to do with the question that they asked you. In this particular test, this question was blown. They did not give you the right sheets for it. I had to go back to a previous question, pull up the column schedule. It was not there. I had to pull up the lateral tie schedule, which I just happened across later in the test. And the lateral tie schedule, which is the one that has all the pictures of the things going on, the ties. Right here was a picture of a column in its typical layout. And there was a little note to the side that said, for number 11 bars, use number 4 ties. For number 9 bars, use number 3 ties. And once I saw that, I was able to answer two or so questions based on that. But what the question asked you was, at the B2 column, between here and here, what size ties does it get? Well, you see that there are number 11 bars up here in this column. You see the number 11 bars get number 4 ties. You go there, you choose number 4, and it's as simple as that.
Wait, can you repeat that?
Okay, we'll go through it one more time. The question is going to ask you, what size ties are in the B11 column between levels 3 and 4? Something like that. I forget where it asked exactly, but it's going to point to a column that's going to say, what size ties are they right there? On my test, they did not give you the right sheets to answer the question from. So I had to go and dig through other questions to pull the sheets out that I needed. Once I did, my first inclination was to go to the column schedule and try to find it right here. There's got to be a note on here that says what size ties there are. There isn't, but it tells you to go to 12 on S5.1 for ties. So you go to 12 on S5.1 and here's your ties. If you scroll all the way over to the right, there's this little diagram on the right, and even further to the right, there's this little box that says, for number 11 vertical steel, use number 4 ties. For number 9 vertical steel, use number 3 ties.
So it's just a note in the corner.
So that was how you had to get that one. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me see how much time we have on this. We're 24 minutes in. Perfect. Okay. You get 2 questions related to the barrier wall, we'll call it, which is You have a foundation plan. It's going to say the concrete wall on line A between 5 and 6 has what reinforcing steel in it? And there's a bunch of business going on in here. There's a bunch of this and that and this and that. It's kind of hard to tell what's what from this view. It gives you a couple cuts though, and obviously we go to the cuts and we see what we got. You go to this cut and it's going to show you the wall is going to be a masonry retaining wall with a concrete slab on top of it and a small concrete wall on top of it. It asks you what the vertical steel, it asks you what the reinforcing steel in the concrete wall is. And what we have to be careful is to not mistake this CMU wall for the wall they're talking about. They're talking about this one right here. This one right here has a little note that says number 5 at 16 inches vertical or whatever the question asked you. Later on in the test, it's going to send you back to this same area, A5 to 6, this same section is going to say, how big is this wall? How thick is this wall? Well, there's a little note that pops out into your eyes. First it says 8-inch something or other, 8-inch wall. And you might want to jump on that real quick, but you got to remember that this is the wall they're asking about, and this one is actually 6 inches. It asks you what is the thickness of the wall on A line between 5 and 6, whatever the cast in place wall. So you got to make sure that you pick that wall, and that wall is 6 inches. They are going to give you the question that says the added reinforcing steel south of the elevator on the 4th tier is what? You find the elevator. You see it's got a lot of business going on around it. The only thing that's tricky about this is what is the added steel and what is south and what is north. And remember that if you don't scroll all the way down to the right corner and see that your compass is turned sideways, you might assume that this is south, but it's not. This is south. And the reinforcing steel bars, there's this little note that says add number 3 at 6 inches, something like that. These are the bars you're looking for, right here. Beam added steel. Okay. The slab steel that you were going to be asked about, this building exists as a series of beams running this to this, column, this to this, concrete beams. On top of these beams is reinforcing steel. In between the beams on the bottom of the slab is reinforcing steel. What they're going to do is they're going to ask you, what is the size and the spacing of the reinforcing steel on the beam between A and B on 6 line? So you've just got to go here, you got to grab that bar, you just got to figure out what size, what length, what spacing that bar is. Simple. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to ask you what the bottom reinforcing steel in the slab. There's no harder than figuring out, okay, that's the bottom reinforcing steel. Go figure out the size, the grade, or excuse me, the size, the spacing, and the length. Those are 2 pretty easy questions on that. You're going to get 3-dimensional questions. I got 3-dimensional questions. One of them is, it asks you the length of the beam, the width of the beam, and the depth of the beam. It's going to give you B6. It's going to say the beam between A and B on 6 line. You pick up the length of it from over here. The length of it is going to be 64 foot 10 inches. Remember, the hash marks this way shows you what is being measured. There's going to be a number of other things being measured in the intermediate space between this, so you can't let that distract you. Disregard this and look for your here to here measurement. You're gonna pull your 6410. Once you get that, it's easy peasy. Get your 6410, you figure out that the beam right here is a B12. You go to the B12 on the schedule. The B12 on the schedule says depth, it says width, it says depth, 18 inches, width, 16 inches, 6410, 18 inches, 36 inches, done. They will give you another dimensional question which just asks you the width and the depth of some beam somewhere, I forget what it is. So you grab it, you go to your schedule. This one's going to be a P. Remember, the post-tension beams have a P. The PG beams are a post-tension girder. Their beams are just Bs. It'll be a P7 width, P7 depth. Done. Easy. The other dimensional one that you get is back at this footing in the foundation. I'm pretty sure that's where it was. And this was the only one that was even moderately tricky, and it wasn't that tricky. Remember, the footing for the shear wall at the foundation has the big end, goes like this, and it goes like this. And I think it asks you what the dimensions of this footing is, what the dimensions of this footing are. And remember, you have your little elevation view right here. You look at that elevation view, it turns it on its side, and I'm pretty sure that the way you answer this is there's this little cut that goes like this, and it says W18D36, something like that. And that's how you pick up the dimensions on that one. I'm pretty sure that's how that went. Okay, so that's about halfway through. I'm going to pause this so the video doesn't time out.
You paid